Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 9th Lineal Justin and Tyler Movie Awards for 2022, and it is time now for the top 5 worst movies of 2022, a list that always, again, this is something to kind of echo something Tyler said off camera, it always winds up being one of the funnier videos that we do. Not necessarily the one that we look the most forward to, but it tends to wind up being one of the funnier ones that we do across these awards, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We've each picked our 5 worst movies of the year, usually a couple of honorable mentions in there as well.
Okay, so we will start with our dishonorable mentions. I just got a few. I don't like to put a lot of honorable mentions for this or best. The Man from Toronto, Neptune Frost, Infinite Storm, Panama, and The Sadness.
The Man from Toronto is sad. That's a sad. It's a
That's
sad.
it, boys. Back it up. We're done.
That's a sad one to be there.
I
feel bad for that one
It is
being
a sad
there,
one.
but it's earned.
There's a lot of tragedy in these picks. So I'll just say a few things about these. Panama's just forgettable, just a crappy movie. The same criticism can really be leveled on The Man from Toronto too, because like I just find it super forgettable. There's like an action scene or two that works for me. I get kind of like a smile here and there. That's the only reason it's only an honorable mention. Infinite Storm hurts because I love me Naomi Watts.
Right.
And Naomi Watts, I say this a lot, is not the problem. She's trying so hard to sell this material.
Right.
But the problem is that the whole most of the movie is basically like a really bad video game escort mission.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. No, those are the worst.
You're damn right they are.
Sorry, go ahead. It's like, oh.
No, you're right. Neptune Frost, I like artsy sci-fi. This is very artsy sci-fi. It's very metaphor-driven. But it just drones on and on. The people talking, they just drone on and on. Everything just drones on and on. There's an interesting world within this movie, but you would never know, judging from how these people act.
Right.
Like I think it was directed by Saul Williams, who was like a slam poetry guy. Like he's actually like a really talented dude. And I think he directed this. He's been in some other movies. I'm less forgiving of this nonsense now.
Right.
I'm like, this is too much. This is too much. And then The Sadness might be the most interesting one. I don't know if you ended up seeing it, but you had actually mentioned it earlier in the year. So I don't know if you got to see it, but you know, the pitch for this movie, I guess, is that it's super gross.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so I didn't say this when I was mentioning Terrifier 2 in some previous videos, but I've said it before to you. I probably said it on video. I'm not a gore hound. Mm-hmm. Telling me that a movie's super gory does nothing for me. It actually kind of turns me away from it unless you say there's something else to it. I watched this in part because you said it was of interest, and then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch it. Right? I'm gonna do it.
Sorry.
This is worse than like you getting me to watch like 50 Shades of Grey trilogy and then not finishing it. I hate this guy. I do so much for him and I get nothing in return. This movie's terrible. If you go beyond the grossness, there's nothing there. Yeah, technically there's a story. What is it? I don't know. Who cares? Like, there are some parts, like, if you're a gore hound, I could understand liking this. Because, like, I mean, one of the beginning scenes was actually, like, really well done and it was gory. But you strip that away and I'm like, is there anything there to latch onto? No, there's no characters. Or anything like that. So I'm not opposed to like excessive gore, but Sadness, I watched it and I'm like, ugh. Like it wasn't even so much like it's arguably the grossest movie of the year. People say like Terrifier 2 is, but there's levity to Terrifier 2 that this doesn't have. Like, this is just straight up just terrible stuff happening. And I ended up getting bored. Right? As disgusting as it is, I was just bored.
My two honorable mentions this year for worst movies of 2022 are Firestarter as well as Shattered. So Shattered we talked about at the mid-years. Firestarter, of course, a remake of a 1984 movie based off of a Stephen King. I don't think it's a novel. Is it a full novel or is it a short story? I think it is. I think it might actually be a full novel.
Is Shattered the one where you were like, the premise was like, and a desperate...
Yes,
for survival. Well, I'm sorry. I'm burying the lead.
No, you are.
Well,
Shattered.
Say it again because I love it.
So Shattered is the story of like this rich divorcee who meets this hot blonde at a bar, and they start drinking, and there's just terrible dialogue, and then they go home, and he's like, "Oh, I'll take you home," and then they just start pounding wine, like after he says that, and wouldn't you know it, they have sex. And it winds up being this like home invasion story, basically. And yes, the premise of this movie is a desperate fight for survival will most likely ensue. No promises.
I remember this line for the mid-year that still gets me.
It's so good. It's so funny.
Most likely ensue.
With Firestarter, it's a movie that gets worse the longer that it goes. It's got an interesting premise.
Sure.
Of like someone who like a little girl who's growing up and trying to control the powers that she has and come to terms with the powers that she has. Like, it's got an interesting premise, wouldn't you know it, with a Stephen King novel. Yeah. But when you're a horror-ish movie that's not scary, you have to be something else.
Yes.
And the movie's just a big pile of nothing. It doesn't explore. There's no philosophy, there's no plot point, there's nothing that's worth exploring, and it doesn't actually get explored. There's nothing really of value to hold on to there in terms of like, what can I salvage as something to remember from this movie? I remember almost nothing from this movie. What I do remember is the terrible mixture of special effects and practical effects that they would use to make the burns that just look like somebody chewed a bunch of like the red colored dentine gum and just stuck it on somebody's face, that it's supposed to look like burns. Like, it just, it should have been so much better than it was. And then Shattered, it will most likely ensue. The two leads have like almost no chemistry together inside of a really, really crummy screenplay. The performances are all around bad, but God bless John Malkovich because he's trying. He's trying so hard to try to make something out of this pile of chicken, you know what. He's trying to make chicken salad out of it. It wants to be a thriller, but it's got absolutely no meat on the bone. So Firestarter and Shattered are my two honorable mentions in the worst movies of the year.
So I think I ended up watching Firestarter like a day after we did the mid-years. I agree with you. I gave it a 5 out of 10. There's some good. Carpenter actually at least helped with the score. I know. Yes. I think there's some other people that kind of slaps a little bit. I like the beginning of it with the credits and the song that plays. Like, I actually listen to that song. It's in my playlist.
Yeah.
The premise is cool. That's it. That's what I got.
Yeah.
So for my number 5, I'm going with Big Bug. Which I gotta call back to the mid-years with this one because I called it Big Poop in honor of him calling Valerian as the city of 1,000 planets, city of 1,000 poops, and they're both from France. So we got the war on France.
It continues.
So I gotta get that out of the way because we gotta make this canon within the the full movie awards. Yeah, I'll keep this one really short, I guess. The director is talented, has done some good movies in the past. I would normally like his colorful aesthetic. Like, there's a lot of flair to what's going on. There's the premise of people being kind of locked in to their own... It's like a sci-fi where they're locked into their house because their robots sense some danger, so they lock them in. It could have been done well, but I don't know. For a director who's been doing it as long as he has, it felt kind of amateurish. Like, there were some fade-outs and stuff that felt super amateurish, and the humor didn't work. There wasn't really any meaningful drama that worked. Yeah, Big Bug, not that I'm in love with the director, but I still expected a little more, and so yeah, Big Poop is my number 5.
And that's another example like Firestarter that wastes an interesting premise.
Yeah, it does.
Because you can look at something like that and be like, there's room here for commentary on the future of artificial intelligence and whatever. Or even if you want to make like a straight comedy movie out of it, you can do that as well. But you got to do something. My number 5 worst movie of 2022. We've talked about it a couple of times. It's Halloween Ends. So I won't take up too much more time on it other than to say that like what this movie is advertised as is it's advertised as bringing the Halloween franchise to a spine-tingling conclusion.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, did you? Did you really? No, it's another movie that's kind of a big pile of nothing. And it's got ideas, but it's one of those, and again, this is a cardinal sin. It's great to have ideas. It's better to explore those ideas than to simply express them. This wants to do some things and express some ideas, but it doesn't want to take any time to explore them whatsoever. And for all the reasons that we've already talked about in multiple videos up to this point, Halloween Ends is my number 5 worst movie of 2022. What a way for one of the horror icons to allegedly go out. And again, how long is it going to take before you can then turn around and reboot this franchise and give us good Michael Myers movies? Like 15 years? It's going to be a long time to get just the idea of Michael Myers out of people's heads, where you could then turn around and go, oh damn, they're rebooting Michael Myers. Awesome. It's going to be a while.
You know, it's actually like kind of sweet that Michael Myers spent basically 40 years trying to kill the same girl. Like, that's some dedication.
That's true.
It's really sweet, but you wouldn't know that because the movie sucks so bad.
Right. It's you will figure that out, but not until there's only about 20 minutes left.
Yeah. So my number 4 is The Cellar. Ooh. Dun, dun, dun. The director did a movie back, I think, in 2017 called Pilgrimage, which I think I actually gave him a nod that year for Best Director somewhere, because I thought that even though I'm really one of the only people that really like that movie, I thought his visual flair was good.
Okay.
This is not that. This is just a crappy horror movie that I haven't really heard anyone talk about, and I probably would have ignored it had I not seen who directed it, because I think this is the first movie he's done since then. It has Alicia Cuthbert in it. I'm like, does anybody care about her at this point?
It's kind of cool to see the name, but
yeah, but is it a selling point though?
Right? Do you have like are the Alicia Cuthbert diehards just like begging for the return?
Yeah, exactly.
Of the Queen.
It has some moments that the horror works. There's a couple scenes like that basically when the horror is heard but not seen, like on the phone and stuff, that is kind of cool, and I'm like, that's effective, that's effective, but that's maybe 3 scenes. It just isn't a good movie like all of these. It doesn't show what made him good. He might be a one-hit wonder, even though his one hit is not really a hit.
Right.
It is to me a bit, but probably not to anyone else.
My number 4 worst movie of 2022 is a movie called Private Property. So this movie stars Ashley Benson, who I think you would know her if you saw her.
Yeah, I know Ashley Benson.
You know Ashley Benson? Yeah, okay, so
she was in Spring Breakers.
Oh, shit, she was. She was in Spring Breakers.
Better Days.
Absolutely right. Yeah, Better Days. Definitely Better Days. So Private Property is the story of a struggling actress played by Ashley Benson who starts hooking up with her gardener. Or is he? Dun, dun, dun.
Is he the gardener? She doesn't know? Or we don't know?
We don't know.
But she knows?
Except we do.
Do the cops know?
So as I start watching this movie, I'm probably about 5 minutes into it. Like, it's just started. And it has already ceased being a question of, is this movie going to be bad? The question has immediately flopped over to, how bad is this movie going to get? It's not a question of if. Now it's a question of how. So as it moves along, it has some ambition. There's some ambition in the way the movie is shot.
Sure.
But it has nothing else. It doesn't follow up on that ambition with anything interesting. And apparently, all it takes to seduce Ashley Benson is bad actor has a beard. So you're in there.
Call me. Call me.
Like the guy who's playing opposite her is like the least convincing, like, non-gardener who's just looking to hook up with a hot out-of-work actress. Like, I don't know what direction this guy was given for this, but I have to wonder if they can get the money back. Because this guy's bad. Yeah. It was the single worst performance. It was almost Tommy Wiseau levels, but Tommy was like, Tommy I think knew he was bad. Or at least partially kind of thought he was bad. And played that up. Or maybe that's just the way he's retconned it. In any case, it was reminiscent of Tommy Wiseau levels of acting. And it turns out he's not the actual gardener. Him and his buddy are on the run from the law. And he's like, I can pretend to be her gardener and do stuff with her. That just seems like, and again,
can't blame a man for trying, I guess.
I guess you can't blame a guy for trying, and it works. It works fairly comfortably, and his buddy's like, I don't know about this, man. And he's like, shut up, I'm gonna have sex with Ashley Benson. And he's like, okay. And he's in the house next door and just kind of watches through the window like he's in a Panic at the Disco music video or something. Like, it's, I don't know, man. Like, everything about this movie, again, it has some ambition, but it follows up on absolutely none of it. So, Private Property, my number 4.
I've never even heard of this one. My number 3 is The Eternal Daughter.
Ooh, okay, because I had heard about this in a couple of places, and it was one that I think was on my radar to download at one point, and didn't.
Yeah, it has it's an A24 movie.
Right.
It's directed by Joanna Hogg, who I actually gave a Best Director nod one year, even though, like, the directing made me feel really conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
So the Boston Herald has a review headline that says, big on atmosphere, short on plot. And frankly, I cannot sum it up even more, like, better than that. It's a horror drama. And there's, like, some horror, like, you might see, like, a ghost or whatever in a window or something, and it's like, whatever, that's basic. The drama, I don't know how there can even be a drama, because it's so short on any drama. Like, people talk, but what are they really talking about? Like, if you're gonna have a really slow movie, which this is, and yes, it's shot fairly well. Hogg is, like, a talented director. He's pretty good. But everything is so shallow, you know, like one of these artsy movies that they're talking about stuff and you're supposed to feel that it's substantial and enlightening in some way, but you're just kind of like, what is this? And then this got compared to The Shining, but shit happens in The Shining.
Right.
Don't leave The Shining's name out of your mouth. Honestly, because that movie is so good. And this drags, and I'm supposed to care about this movie because it's pretty. But I am so past that now. Like, I can be impressed by a movie and end up liking it if the directing is so good that there's, like, a lot to look at. I mean, I'm never gonna love a movie that sucks plot-wise but looks pretty, but I can at the very least be like, yeah, you know, it's okay. This isn't okay. This is one of the worst movies of the year. I thought maybe this was gonna be a case that, like, I don't get it, but I'm pretty sure I looked up these movies a while ago, and critics might have liked this, I think, but this year I'm with the people on all these movies. I think I think I looked, and I'm pretty sure the reception for all of my movies the people didn't like.
Okay,
so I'm with the people on this one.
A man of the people. Tyler from the Justin and Tyler Movie Awards.
It's just like, okay, so when A24 really started to hit for me, I was like, okay, they got their style, their movies are worth watching, even if they're not all great, they're interesting, and there's still some fantastic A24 movies, like Hereditary. This is not one of them, and I'm getting a little tired of their thing.
Okay.
Like, I'll still seek some out. that sound interesting and all that, but I'm getting a little bored with A24. And I'm not saying that in the next years there won't be some A24 movies that are just outstanding and make it on my list. There might be one this year, I can't remember without looking at my list. This is like the worst example of A24. This is the slog A24 that is just like, okay guys, I'm not smart enough to get your artsy movie.
It's time for my number 3 worst movie of 2022, and Tyler, you would think, like with Halloween Ends having already been mentioned on this list, you would think, well, that's got to be the worst reboot or most recent entry in a long-running horror franchise, right?
Right.
You'd be wrong in saying that. My number 3 worst movie of 2022 is Jeepers Creepers Reborn.
I forgot about Jeepers Creepers.
So, a 4th installment / soft reboot of the Jeepers Creepers franchise, starring the Creeper, who, stop me if you've heard this concept before, is a creature that shows up every 23 years. So, alright, if you've ever watched any of the Jeepers Creepers movies before, you understand what this is. The Creeper shows up every 23 years, goes on a killing spree for 23 days, and then pisses off somewhere and disappears for another 23 years. So this is, and I will give it some credit, it is self-aware of how bad it is.
Okay.
It's very obviously self-aware that it's not a good movie. But that means that then the decision to be bad, or the status of being bad, is an active decision.
Right.
And that somehow makes it worse.
Right.
Like, if you're actively deciding to be a bad movie, somehow with me, that makes it worse. If you were just bad, but you were trying to be good, if you're trying, I can kind of get on board with you, and I can kind of be forgiving of that. But when you're making the active decision to be a bad movie, somehow, to me, that just doesn't work. Like a lot of other movies I've talked about in this video, it gets worse as it goes. Like, the longer this movie's going, just the worse it's getting. And not even necessarily that it's intentionally trying to get worse as it goes, it's just getting worse as it goes. And this is a movie that suffers from 2 fatal flaws. The first one is, it was made by people that had neither the budget or the ability, or maybe both, to actually make a decent horror movie in general, or follow up in this franchise, or whatever. They either didn't have the ability, didn't have the money, maybe didn't have the desire, or all 3 of those things, because it's another one of these horror movies that the CGI looks like it was rendered in Microsoft Paint. I love saying that because it just looks terrible. Like,
yeah,
there would be like the creeper would come across the screen and it would just be like a static image of him and just be like, wee! It's like, oh my god. It's like week 1 film school stuff. Like, it's just awful. And number 2, literally no one was asking for a 4th entry or a soft reboot of the Jeepers Creepers franchise. I promise you no one was asking for this, but you decided to give it to us anyway. So that's my number 3 worst movie of the year, Jeepers Creepers Reborn.
Yeah, it almost makes it worse when it's like a movie that knows it's bad, but it's like part of an established franchise. I don't know. It feels weirder to me.
Right.
Like, people know the name, even if it's not like one of the legendary, franchises, and then they poo all over it. I had no interest in this whatsoever. It came into my radar, I think, because someone mentioned it to me. I was like, nah.
Like, no thanks.
No,
in 2022, not necessary.
We ain't doing this. My number 2 is The Bubble. Directed by Judd Apatow. And actually directed by him, I think. Not just written or produced. Oh man, this movie's just so lifeless and like unclever.
Yeah.
Is unclever a word?
Yep, it is now.
Yeah, like Karen Gillan or whatever is like pleasant to look at and like tries, I guess.
I really like her.
Yeah, me too. I like her. She does what she can. The movie, it's not as long as like a 3-hour Babylon, but it's like 2 hours, and I'm like, why is this movie that long? They're making a film in it, and it's so hokey and crappy. I mean, it's supposed to be, I guess. But it just felt like filler.
Yeah.
To extend the runtime.
Like, Judd, I hate to break it to you. You don't have that kind of staying power.
No,
you don't.
This will be a short one. I don't know. I was actually like kind of excited because I like when Judd movies hit because he's made some of the great comedies.
Yeah.
At least of like the last couple decades. And this is definitely not it. And again, I'm with the people because nobody likes this movie.
Right. This is on so many worst lists.
There's a stink on this one that is universal.
Yeah. It's time for my number 2 worst movie of 2022. And hey, Tyler, you'd think...
I love when you come to me with questions.
You'd think with Jeepers Creepers Reborn, you'd think that must have been the worst soft reboot or latest entry in a much beloved horror franchise, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Justin.
You'd be wrong. My number 2 worst movie is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Because they obliterated Leatherface.
Justin?
How they made him look like a goofy buffoon. That whole movie is just okay. So here's the premise for this version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which since they just called it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I have to assume it's a soft reboot of the whole franchise.
Yeah.
They didn't put a number on the end of it, but then again, they didn't do that with Scream either. But, okay. So this is like, obviously you're familiar with Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with Don Lemon?
Yes.
So you have ultra liberal and you have ultra conservative.
Yeah.
It feels like they sat those two at the opposite ends of a very long table and said, each of you write half of this movie. Because you have like the ultra liberal city folk, bleeding hearts, and the deep south West Texas rednecks. The movie featuring Leatherface. So you have this group of like ultra liberal city folk, students, whatever, who come to this like very obviously like deep south Texas town, and you got everybody there that's just like, I don't like folks that have your color skin. Like you got those people. And it's just it's the worst stereotypes of both of them. And it just so happens, wouldn't you know it, this is the town where Leatherface and his mother are. Apparently Leatherface has a mother. So they're in this house that these liberal folks have bought for something or was available to buy from the bank. It's like an eviction drama starring Leatherface. The mother has a heart attack. Leatherface and the mother get in an ambulance. The mother dies, Leatherface kills the paramedics and escapes and comes back to town and terrorizes the folks, and they're just like, take that, liberals. Take that, millennials.
Yeah.
You're all on a party bus live streaming stuff, and it's like, wow, here's Leatherface with a chainsaw, and it's like, why is this a Leatherface movie? This is another instance where this could have been any other movie.
Yeah.
But because it's Leatherface, and because you put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in your title, you then lend yourself to certain expectations. You lend yourself to being judged against the history of the character. And unfortunately, in an incident like this, it's not going to be judged in a positive light. Like, even lovers of this genre or of this franchise, I can't imagine anybody getting anything from this. It's 85 minutes of nothing that they pay off with a goofy... Do you know the ending of this movie?
No.
Like, the end scene of this movie. Okay. So the end scene of this movie is like the main liberal girl. I'm liberal girl. and like one of the other people are like the only ones that survive. And she's in I think it's a self-driving car. being taken away, like she's gonna go somewhere. And just out of nowhere, they think they've killed Leatherface. What a shock, they actually haven't.
But Leatherface is the car. He was the car all along.
No, that would have been a great end.
I know.
No, but Leatherface comes out of nowhere and kills one more person, and she's like screaming in the back of this self-driving car that she can't stop.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, Leatherface, no. And literally, well, she doesn't call it Leatherface, but like, no. And then literally the final scene of this movie is Leatherface has his chainsaw and he's like doing Jenna Ortega Wednesday dances with his chainsaw. And that's the end of the movie. And I'm like, you turned him into a cartoon character. Like, what is this? He's one of the greatest icons in horror. And again, I'm no bastion of horror.
Sure.
But like, I know where the bread is buttered in the genre. And stuff like this, stuff like Jeepers Creepers Reborn, stuff like Halloween Ends, it's not modern takes on the genre. It's just crapping on older characters, is all that it is. You make these bad movies that shoehorn in these classic characters, and it doesn't, it's not to your benefit, and it's not to their benefit, so why are you doing it? So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my number 2.
Here's a spoiler for next year, I'm sure, on at least one of our lists, but there's a new Saw coming out.
Yes.
I guarantee this will be on one of our lists. Because I'm actually going to watch this one.
Yep.
That sucked. I never thought about it until you were going down this rabbit hole of crappy horror movies that there's, 2 legendary franchises and then Jeepers
Creepers.
Which is, I think there's some love for maybe the first or second.
Yeah.
It's getting pooed on. So my number 1 worst movie of the year is Memoria.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a boring pick because I kind of foreshadowed this. Telegraphed it with the Can't Believe I Hated, which I don't really like to do, but I didn't have a good I Can't Believe I Hated. So what I said in a previous video, actually I'm going to quote a guy from Criticker because I realized I have a quote that someone said.
Yeah.
I parroted the opinion in an earlier video, but now I got the direct quote. Eventually I will stop tolerating filmmakers who lazily set up static shots on a tripod and call themselves filmmakers. Now, the director of this is a filmmaker. I said in a previous video he's made one of my favorite foreign movies of all time. He's great. He's an adventurous director. He does some interesting stuff. Yeah, his movies can be a little slow, but he's got cool premises. He's a great director, and I hate hating this movie. But this guy is completely right. Just had like a book of still shots from this movie, it would probably work better. Because you'd be like, that's a pretty picture, that's a pretty picture, that's a pretty picture. Not that this is Blade Runner 2049 levels of beauty where I could just look at that movie all day, but there are some good shots.
Yeah.
That he sets up the camera, that he frames it well, but then they just linger. And everything's so one note, the characters are so one note that I'm listening. Again, this is one of those artsy things like The Eternal Daughter. Actually, do they both have Tilda Swinton? Maybe they do. Man, I might hate her this year. But,
oh no, Tilda.
Dude, and then she was a narrator in Last and First Men from last year, which was my most hated. I don't like Tilda Swinton.
She was in 3,000 Years of Longing this year, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was in that, but I didn't see that. No, I don't hate her, but apparently I do hate some of her choices.
That's such a great way to put it.
But yeah, now I don't even know what I was saying. I was so bored. I'm like, oh my god, this movie. I'm just not gonna forgive this. And if this makes me some stupid pleb, then so be it. But I also, again, keeping with my. You have your little thing going on about horror movies. With my little man of the people thing, I'm pretty sure that people also hated this. So I don't feel as bad about this. Because normally I'm more in line with critics. I guess I'm kind of more, I protect these artsy movies. But when done well, or not done well, done poorly, there's almost nothing worse than a movie that's up its own butt.
Right.
You can appreciate true beauty and artsiness and thought put into these movies But you gotta have something to care about too, and this Memoria doesn't have it. So I hope he bounces back with a really great movie next, because I don't want to poop on him another year. And I don't have the same like level of like passion, I guess, for the hatred as you have in these other movies. I'm like kind of low key on this one, but it hurts me.
You're not mad, you're just disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. So my number one is Memoria.
It's time for my number one worst movie of 2022. And in order to properly chastise this film, Tyler, you and I have to go back in time. We're going back to those heady days of 2011. We're off the heels of the first ever movie awards. You know, the world seems bright. And then, in quick succession, 2 movies come into my life. And I think to myself, why? Those movies are 2012 Ice Age and Battle of Los Angeles.
Yes. Yes, that crappy.
And I go, what is this? What's a mockbuster?
Yeah.
And why, in the right mind, would anyone watch this? And I fell down the rabbit hole of The Asylum.
And you've been watching their movies ever since.
Occasionally, I will come across one of their films, and it almost guarantees that it'll be somewhere in my worst movies of that year. My number one worst movie of 2022 is Titanic 6.
I almost watched that, but didn't. Oh, damn it, I should have watched it!
You should have watched it.
Crap!
So, for this, I will simply read verbatim my critic or review, because I can never make it any more succinct than I do here. Me. The more things change, one thing remains the same, unbending through the ages. The asylum will never stop. Since 1999, your one-stop chop shop for the cheap, lazy, poorly made, and shouldn't exist. And this may be the best thing they've ever done. Filled with all the awful CGI and unmixed sound effects you know and love. Most egregiously, a man shoots himself in the head, lands on the ground, and has no entry or exit wounds on his head. A stowaway cuts herself in the basement and spews vaguely religious alphabet soup. And bam, zombie ghosts. Fuck the asylum. Titanic 666, my number one worst movie of 2022. Just keep pumping them out, guys, and I'm more than happy to keep knocking them over the left field fence. You suck. There you have it, folks. Those are our worst movies of 2022. Tyler, do you have any closing thoughts on the pile of garbage that we just sifted through?
This was all very heartbreaking. I feel like a lesser person. And I feel like I have died a little bit inside.
Right.
But all in all, a pretty good time.
All in all, 10 out of 10, good video. That's a subtle nod to one of our favorite people ever on Criticker.
Yeah.
So, now that we have finished that and our hands are smelly from digging through all that garbage, now it's time to move on to the good stuff. To your good stuff and to our good stuff. The top 30 best movies of 2022, as well as the fans' choice for best movie of 2022. Now, the next time you see us, we'll be wearing different clothing, because we're going to record this tomorrow. We genuinely appreciate all the time that you take to check us out and watch these awards. We love doing them every single year. And now it's time to go to the good stuff. The top 30 best movies of 2022 and the fans' choice. Those are coming up in the next videos.
Thank you.